How you doing?
I'm better.
Yeah, you look at
I mean, I'm almost normal.
my mom
The eye
had
is a little off.
my mom had it.
It's not unusual.
Very painful.
It wasn't as
It
bad.
wasn't as bad, because you had the vaccine, right?
I had the vaccine. I also got onto like the
If you
day
get
that it was obvious what it was.
That's the key.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock, the official clock. So I'd like to call to order the regular hybrid meeting of the Woodstock Planning Board for June 1st, 2023. We do have a quorum. Do you have any updates?
No.
We have the minutes from May 4th and the 18th.
I move we approve the minutes May 4th and 18th.
Okay. Second, all in favor? Aye.
Thanks, guys.
All right. All right, for new business, we have a sketch plan review, a couple of STRs, and the HOT discussion. So the first one is Daniel Jacobs and Corinne Adul, which is the Wetlands and Watercourse for 23-051. This is a sketch plan review of a wetlands and watercourse permit application to construct a deck within the wetlands and watercourse buffer in the R1.5 zoning district located in 32. It is that we'd like to do.
Yes, I want to construct a freestanding deck, so no ledge to the house. Basically, in my backyard, which happens to be right on the Sawkill, it's within the setback, 750 square foot deck, 2 levels. Pretty much using the same area where there was an existing concrete pad, which was a disaster, and one habitable space. You know, we're never going to make it an interior space, and just hoping to be able to enjoy our space and get up off the dirt a little bit. And
yeah, I took a quick look at your sketch. The Woodstock Wetlands and Watercourse law states that there's a 100-foot buffer on the Sawkill, and that buffer starts from the top of the bank, not the creek, not the edge of the water. So that's actually not showing the 100-foot buffer from the top of the bank, so we don't know where that 100-foot buffer is.
right, so if you were to
I have the map.
Continue.
my entire house is within the 100-foot buffer. It's already
We're trying not to
existed.
make it worse.
No, I understand. Yeah, 100%. So, as I completely understand, few footings in the ground are not going to make what's existing there any worse. There, like I said, there was a concrete pad existed there for many, many years. It was a complete hazard. Got a 3-year-old.
We'll come out and take a look, and I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the map has to be correct for us to file, so it's got to show the 100-foot setback from the creek.
Okay.
On the map.
No problem. So when you say the map,
right.
So you take a look at.
So what you sent was pictures and this, but as you can see, there's this 50.
Well, that's a regular setback.
No, it's 100.
But you need to depict that it's 100.
So this
it needs
is
to
one
be
of
measured and shown on the plan.
Right. So
one of the
banks.
maps. Is there another
Because
map?
it's the Sawkill.
Right. I understand. So, and you're saying 100 feet from the
bank.
top of the bank,
So
not where the water moves. So
right.
the top of the bank, 100 feet. You're probably going to be back here.
Well, as long as it shows it on the map, then we need to have an accurate showing of the 100-foot buffer. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. So another map that depicts the edge of the bank, the top of the bank, where it rolls down, 100 feet setback from that, and we can see where we land within that. Just as a logistical point of business, okay.
We just need to see the dimensions. You have to display the dimensions.
Okay.
And they'll go out and look,
Yeah,
but
Yeah, we'll take a site visit. And,
you can get like just a number. We need a number. It needs, you know,
we need to know how many feet from
the top of the mountain.
how long the feet.
we may have to refer it to the DEC. That's a DEC controlled stream.
Okay.
Their concern obviously is any kind of thing that could create erosion going into that creek.
Right, exactly. I completely understand. So is my next thing to submit another map and then schedule for another planning board meeting and then schedule a site visit?
There's like plan, just making it exactly as we asked.
Okay.
And I will schedule a site visit
Okay.
and we'll get somebody out there to look and I'll be in touch and we'll talk. And
Okay.
back and figure it.
Okay, that sounds fine. So that's really all you need from me. You want to know
Where the
where on this, where the top of the bank is up here, 100 feet from there, and just give you a line.
Right.
Okay.
So like the action.
Yeah, I understand. I mean,
And
the
we're
whole house,
laying,
like I said, I mean,
be within that
I'm
setback.
fully
Yeah.
aware you're not an engineer,
yeah,
but
yeah.
actual
I have a tape
dimensions.
measure.
I
Yeah.
think the whole house is inside the.
I do.
It is, yeah.
It 100% is. Yeah. I
And
mean, it's
you
just.
need to consider seriously if you do not have flood insurance.
Oh, I'm well aware of the whole situation. Yeah, I'm on much higher ground than anything around me.
That's what we'll determine.
That's a
Site
whole
visit.
other-
It'd be nice to have an elevation too. I mean, the idea is that if you can put.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can put the contour
Because if it
lines on,
floods,
that'll
I
get
doubt
us
if
some
it floods, I think
information.
you're above that.
But so you need an elevation certificate too? Or?
No, just.
Give me a second and I can tell you what the elevation is.
The
within
site
a few
visit to
feet.
tell us, you know.
Yeah, it's 700.
We just need dimensions on what.
I understand. You want
just
it.
to be
Okay,
out,
so
and then we'll do a site
I'll bring that
visit.
by your office.
Yep.
Let me know.
And then I will let you know when we plan on popping one.
Okay.
Who wants to be my site reps?
I can do it.
Are we teaching again?
We can go.
All right, Saturday, Sunday, guys.
Which,
No, I guess so.
Come on, Mr. Delineator. I need.
You
All right,
are
it's
right
legally
about
limited.
593 feet, 760 feet.
Yeah, 700 something.
I'll arrange it with
760 feet.
the, okay, 4 of us.
Okay, cool.
We'll do it on a Saturday.
You're slightly downhill from
That's
760 feet. Because
Because
that's outside your house on the other side.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see how everybody wants to do it.
How big is
I
it?
consider you.
About 750. 750 square feet.
Would they be able to cantilever something off the building?
I can't because I'm not gonna, the way I want to do it, I can't cantilever. I want to do a flush joist deck. So I want to get it as low to the ground as possible. So I can't do any cantilevering past.
I mean, the DEC, we've had other cases before, similar or something, to the deck, the DEC did approve it. Based on the pillar concept, their concern is that if you were too close to the creek, and the creek goes, rip the deck out,
Yeah.
and tore that down the creek, that's.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, just go from there.
I'll be in touch.
Yes. Okay, thank you guys. I appreciate
And
it.
I'll let you
Thanks
know
for
when we're
clarity.
gonna come out so we don't scare anyone.
Yeah,
You don't
that
turn
sounds
around and
good.
see some
I'd like to.
strangers in
I'd like to do
your
that.
yard. All right. All right.
Thank you so much. I mean, would be on the weekend? You're saying on Saturday?
Probably it's up to who.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
gotta
I
schedule
got
everyone.
4 of us to figure out, so
Okay.
either a late afternoon or for a Saturday.
Are you there most of the time?
I'm work day is normally for construction, so I'm not there.
You're
normally.
here all the time.
In any case, it would help. if you
I can
put
make some-
stakes. If you just put stakes where you want to put the deck.
Okay.
Ribbon on it, so we know.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, I could also, I mean, I'm self-employed, so I can be there. In schedule, I'd like to be there.
Sounds good. I won't. And stakes, so if just any kind of mark out what you want to do.
Corners, or you want to, know where the corners are.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. I got it.
So
Thank you,
it's not
guys.
gonna be exactly the same place that the current slab is?
There's no slab there anymore. It is going to be within those bounds, plus another area which is further away from the creek,
And
actually.
is the old location of the concrete slab visible?
Oh, yeah, it's basically, it's the exact thing in these pictures. I mean, right now it's just mulch. It's a mulch area with
Well,
some,
if you
outdoor furniture.
If you stake the corners, it's gonna be that.
Yeah.
absolutely. No, I'd be happy to. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Give me a call, let me know when it's staked out, and I'll work on scheduling. as we
You
go.
got it. I'll bring you a
Perfect.
drawing as soon as
Thanks, Dan.
possible.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have 3 STRs. I'm going to read the 3 of them, and then we'll address all 3 again. So we have Lisa Kolotek, SUP 230676, sketch plan review with special use permit application for a short-term rental of 2-bedroom, non-owner occupied dwelling in the R8 zoning district located at 80 Yearville Road in Woodstock.
R3.
And then we have Ann and Michael Henry, sorry, sketch plan review with special use permit application for a short-term rental of a 4-bedroom, non-owner occupied dwelling in the R5 zoning district located at 93 Baker Road, Bearsville. And then we have Daniel Heather Cross, SUP number 230678, which is a sketch plan review with a special use permit application for a short-term rental of a 4-bedroom, non-owner occupied dwelling in the R5 zoning district located at 6 Kings Edge in Woodstock, which is also off the area. So those are the 3.
We got a few and a few.
The crosses are online.
Crosses are online.
Okay, so the situation with all these short-term rentals is that it's really handled by the building department, everything about it. The planning board doesn't do site views or
Should I
site.
sit here?
Is that?
Should I come and sit here?
No, you can just listen. You just interrupted me. Well, okay.
If planning board members want to ask questions, go ahead, but there's nothing that we can do. It's in the hands of the building department.
Okay. And these specific cases were approved by the town board.
I move we wait for the review.
I'd like some further detail. Detail, why?
There was a
Is that
group.
the same question?
They were approved before the moratorium, is that right? And
No,
then
well, I don't know
I
what.
don't think they were.
Yeah,
I
no.
understand.
Their applications weren't in and the cap was met. And there was a group that had kept returning to the town board. And there was a group on the April, was it April? I think April town board agenda where they approved 15 houses for short-term rentals. They have to go through the process. So here we are.
Additional 15 to the original number.
Yes,
Yes.
Tom.
Additional.
Yes,
Town board approved.
because as I remember it, they had applied to the county and they had gotten their county license, but they never applied under the county.
How is that our fault?
Exactly.
The town board apparently has decided that it is the town's problem.
Right.
So we're gonna see if
Would
you
you like
like.
any background?
Yes, I would love some
I'd
background.
be happy
You can come up, Lisa. I was trying to make it
It's
easy.
okay. I'd be happy to share with you. And my husband is there, and Jonathan and Heather and Cross are up there, and Michael Henry, who was stuck in traffic, will be here in about 5 minutes. He apologizes for being late. So, yeah, so all of us have had our houses for different amounts of time. Mine since 1976. All of us were renting our houses out short term for a number of years, 2 years, 10 years, whatever. And we all had Ulster County permits. We were all paying taxes, and we didn't know that we needed a Woodstock permit. We thought we were okay until we received violations. So we've been part of a group that has been working with the town board to try to figure out a way to establish an STR law that is fair and equitable and easy to manage and actually meets the goals. And I could talk about that for a long time, but I don't want to waste your time, but I have lots of materials about it. And in many conversations with Bill McKenna and Bennett Radcliffe and Maria Elena Conti, we came to many town board meetings, decided to pass a resolution for now to provide provisional permits to a small group of us, not all of the people in our association, but about 15 who meet certain criteria.
Association.
Association.
What association?
The Woodstock, we created a group called the Woodstock Short-Term Rental Association because we felt we weren't being represented. We're just a group, you know, people who came together and to work together because we have common interests. to be able to rent out our homes. And in my case, I'm a part-timer. I can't live here full-time. I haven't figured out a way to make a living here, so I come here whenever I can. But I'm not here all the time, so I rent out my home to help me pay expenses. I hope to retire there eventually. But in any case, they unanimously approved these provisional permits for about 15 people who already had Ulster County permits and were paying taxes, were already renting their houses out, by the time all the laws were passed. And also, this is important, we do not have an ADU on their property. So none of us have an additional dwelling unit that could be available for long-term rental. So all of us use our houses part-time. So we can't rent our houses full-time. We can't rent them. So they're not available for long-term rent. And this was a very important part. And lovely people to really make sure that there's an understanding that our houses are not available for long-term rental because we use them. We just don't use them full-time.
I have a question. Why is it considered a non-owner occupied dwelling if you're using it?
And I can answer. When they put the law into effect, and in other towns also, this was the differentiation between owner and non-owner. So owner occupied would mean that that's your main residence. Non-owner occupied would mean that you reside elsewhere.
I got you, but you still use it. Yeah,
So
you're still
you
using
vote
it.
and pay taxes in Manhattan or something.
Well, we pay taxes.
No, I'm
We
sorry.
simplify
I mean, your
it as
income
what
tax is
drivers
filed.
My
pay.
income tax filed there, but I pay tax on, I
Yeah,
pay several
No, I
thousand
didn't
dollars a
mean
year
it. I
for
didn't
my
mean
house.
real estate tax. I mean, you
Right.
vote and you're registered as your primary residence, not here.
Right,
This
right,
is your
exactly.
secondary
So
residence.
basically what Peter said was the building really handles short-term rentals. So we saw a bunch, not you guys, but we saw a ton. And then there was an emergency order and we got through that ton. And now we're gonna see more because whether or not people fall off, we have these 50 transfers. So every once in a while, when you think you're done, we have a few more come back. So he's stressing that enforcement, regulation, inspections happen through the building. They check the Airbnb websites, they send violations. I mean, I hear this all the time. Judy did make a motion to piggyback
But it
off
was
of
not
what Peter
seconded.
said to waive further review. If I hear a second, we can continue on that.
This is Michael Henry.
Hi, Michael.
Sorry, I'm late.
I want to just mention one thing. These lovely people like really didn't know anything about the history of why we're here, after the cap. I wanted to just mention that the original cap was set in 2019, I believe at 360 permits. And then in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, actually, it was reduced to 285. Not sure why, because so just so you
What it
know.
is that we need is 280 long-term rentals. That's what we're doing.
Right. But so this extra 15 is over and above the 285. It's not over and above the original 360. So we're still way below the original number that was set. I just wanted to make that clear. I'm just kind of explaining
The history of
it's up
the
fast.
group of us that never got notified.
Michael's house is in Bearsville. We've had it for a long time too.
Since 2004.
So as I said, there's nothing that the board can add to as far as the special use permit goes. The only thing I would have changed on all of them is to have them not run with the man, but just for the person man. Too late for that. So
Well, I think they're thinking about it again, so there may be a change in the town law, but for now, that's where it is.
Yeah, so there
because
is.
we're going to go into a long discussion now about how to create long-term housing.
Right.
And we've
So
been-
Judy made the motion to waive further review, piggybacked off of Peter. Do I hear a second?
Does anybody else have questions
Sorry.
about this cases?
What's the motion?
The motion
waive
is
further
to
review.
waive further review.
Wait.
Waive
Waive.
further review, which means it's done.
Well,
I
paper.
wasn't sure what that meant.
Paper.
I never understand the language thing.
Well, I don't know, great. Jennifer, anybody have any other questions? There's nothing on the site.
Had an inspection already. William Spencer came and inspected.
We get a referral from them.
Okay, so we're looking for a
You want a
second.
second?
Second,
Peter's gonna second.
all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Surprise, John, I did not, I really knew that was going the other way. You know.
I wasn't gonna.
All right, so guys, just process wise, I will prepare resolutions for all three of you, Mr. and Mrs. Cross online. At the next meeting we have, the board will approve the resolution. You will end up with your SUP within the next month, as long as you contact back with me and we finish final development phase of paperwork.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are.
Congratulations.
Thank
you.
Thank you, guys.
Day one, we've had difficulty.
Congratulations on your battle with the town board, and you did win.
Some of us do not feel it.
So just so you know, there isn't, the STR task force is still alive or has been re-energized. And Heather and I have been invited as guests, and we've been attending Fridays with this task force. And we are really working to try to make adjustments to it so that it aligns with the set of goals and that it really is effective.
Direct conflict. Goal it's down, which is called the Board of Housing.
Right, no,
It's a
but-
direct conflict.
We're trying to actually,
That's what
we're
we're trying
making
to
some, we're trying to
That's
raise some funds from increased permitting fees to be dedicated to affordable housing funding. And we're also trying to tweak the laws so that people who have accessory dwelling units that could be long-term rentals are incentivized to use those as long-term rentals instead of short-term rentals. And we're also trying to advocate for the permits to not run with the land, because we think that distorts housing values and leads to, it just doesn't make sense that it should, with an exception in case of an inheritance or divorce.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So
we're also, one more thing, is the law needs to be written in such a way so that people who are investors, people who are doing it, not because they're community members like us, but are weeded out. Like right now,
Absolutely.
we've got a copy, before Michelle, we have a copy of the owner, quote unquote, owner occupied list. We know for a fact that there are people on that list who are investors. We know there's someone who has two houses on the same street and doesn't live in either of them.
Haley,
So, sorry.
the board has had this conversation time and time again, and the same
So we're
exact
working,
thing you're
just to
saying.
know, we're working on this task force on this. And we look forward to continue the conversation.
Thank you, guys. I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hey, oh. Is there unfinished business? Revisions discussion. Yeah, I guess is gonna provide us with a summary. to begin with.
well, also,
You guys want to
Kirk
come up?
and Deborah are here.
Hi, folks.
Hi.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm leaving town. I'm going away. I'm never coming back. No. I'm just kidding. I'm going on a trip and I just want to stay healthy. So I'll do my best to
Just to sort of
articulate.
frame this,
Yeah,
just to sort of frame this, it has been proposed to the town board. They have received it for consideration. They haven't passed it, and have received it for consideration. We had a second meeting with them at which we gave a PowerPoint presentation that went into more details. There are lots and lots of documents on the town website, and they're sorted out so that the things you really need to read that will help you understand it and the actual code are on one part of the website, and auxiliary things like Nan Stolzenberg's resume are in a different part. So it's not like 20 documents.
Thank you, Judy.
Contrary to some opinions, it is not 300 pages. The entire zoning and subdivision code, and I'm saying that because what we call zoning is two things. It's subdivision code and it's zoning code. Zoning says what you can do where, and subdivision says how it can be divided. And those are two different codes. They have to be in alignment with each other, and that was one problem. There were definitions that didn't match. But in the actual 300 and some pages, that is all of the old code that includes like 20 pages of how to pave a road. And I'm not kidding. There's maybe 50 pages that has a change on it somewhere, and it may be nothing more than a typo caught or a tweaking of the definition. So that is what we are talking about, not 300 pages. The documents that we have put on the website include a 2-page highlights document, the slides from the PowerPoint that we did, a 7-page document that Nan wrote that explains the way that the proposed code would affect housing, and a 12-page summary of all of ours. Now, the 2-page highlight document, about half of that is the history of how this all went. And anybody who tells you it was in the dark has not been awake for 2 years. Because a year ago, it went before the town board, it went on the website, and people were invited to comment, which they did. And we read through all the comments and categorized them, and some of them really weren't relevant, and some of them were very pertinent, and we took them into account, and in some cases made changes. And some of them were non-zoning issues that we are proposing to the town board certain kinds of policy changes. But the thing that is most important to understand is you don't have to say yes or no to the whole thing. What we are being asked for is, where are there problems here? What works here? What could be better? Because the town board has the power to change anything in what we propose. Now, we hope that they will see the value of what we've done, and they're not going to change a lot. And there are major categories of what we've done that have to do with protection of the environment and either requiring or incentivizing affordable housing in a variety of ways. Some new kinds of structures and arrangements of houses on the land that we hope will make it easier to have affordable housing, and that will certainly protect the environment, because you won't be taking a piece of land and cutting it up into all the same size lots, which then turn into lawn. You will be required for a large project to preserve a lot of land. For a small project, you can't do the death of 1,000 cuts, where you keep doing little moves, and all of a sudden you've done a major subdivision over 10 years that nobody ever noticed. It will be noticed now. So that's a very big general summary of the kinds of things we have done. But the thing that's most important to understand is we do not have to say yes to all of it or no to all of it.
Correct.
We are being asked what works, what might be problematic, is there a way to make it better?
And no one would know better than all of you.
Right.
I might add a couple more things to Judy's summary. The task force did not do anything associated with the as of right housing. So no single family home, no, all the things that you could go to the building department for. We didn't make any revisions in that area at all. The area that we focused on was, as per the comprehensive plan's mandate, is to create housing options. And so that's where we got into affordable housing, different types of housing, different types of structures, and the way in which those things could be built, and the criteria that would enable you folks to then review and approve it. Any multifamily dwelling in our code, in the revised code. So the 40 pages we actually created, because there was no chapter in the code, in the current code, there's no housing chapter. And so we then created that as well. We put all things with housing into a single chapter.
But it's not all new stuff.
It's
moved into
right.
one place.
Some things are moved into
exists.
here. There is some new language in here for things that like the 3 and 4 plex housing, which is not in the current code. That's new in here. The conservation subdivision is new in here. A few other things, but basically, sorry, I really shouldn't do this, but I do recycle all the paper that I have. This is the draft. This is the red line version, although it's blue. But this is basically the original, and then areas that have been removed and edited out. And so this is also on the website, and you have this as well. But this is the clean copy with all the changes accepted, so you can read through it.
So you can see exactly what got changed
and see what
how it got changed.
Right. So this shows you what got changed and how, and this shows you what the changes look like, so you can read it and figure out what that makes, how that works.
When we first met with you,
yeah,
and Judy, you know, I've spoken to you guys many times.
right.
That's exactly how I did it. Because I took that, and that's what I did, and that's what I tore it all, but you know.
Right. Thank you for doing that.
Again, you know,
right.
What we said from the gate and what I said to you on our very first meeting that we had with Kirk and Deb was a lot of what's in there we've been doing. We asked them to conserve land. Like you guys have this subdivision so down that you know the law, you know the code. They added words, they added the idea of affordable housing, but a lot of it is what we do every day. Except when we get a plan, and then FAMmakers came, and that was a perfect example of what we're going to ask for.
So the difference is that in this new code, it is required. So it's not a may do this, it's a shall protect 50%.
Than we are.
Oh, without a doubt.
And they 150%.
And they saw the draft from last year, and they were, you know,
and went right off the comp plan.
Right, which is the other thing that this does, which is another important step forward. If a town has, I said this, but if a town has an adopted comprehensive plan by state law, zoning must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. If your zoning existed before there was a comprehensive plan, it's a logical thing that when you have a comprehensive plan, you're going to look at the zoning and bring it into alignment. And that's what we were seeking to do. The other thing I just wanted to point out, and then maybe we'll get into more discussions, there are several things that, for instance, the wellhead protection overlay district, we didn't do anything with that, but that's added in because that was passed last year by the town. The CEA was designated last year by the town. That got added in. The critical
environmental areas, and it is the area that we call Xena Woods, but it's kind of the southeastern corner of town.
Right.
That passed. It was never registered with the DEC, and Ken and Jackie. Ken approached me for new maps, which I sent him. And everything is now getting
and that doesn't require specific approval, but it does require the planning board to take a close look and consideration. But the other thing I just wanted to say, with some of the different housing types we're talking about, we were very sensitive to avoid R8 and scenic overlay district for all multi-family housing over 4 units. So if you have, right now you can have a duplex, right? You can have 2 family.
Anywhere in town.
Anywhere in town.
That is by right.
As of right, you can have an accessory dwelling, which they now currently call accessory apartment. But on the multifamily, so anything between 5 and 8 units in a single building could not be built in the R8 or in the scenic overlay in the new proposed code. We also excluded short-term rentals. We didn't change the short-term rental law, so it references the current law. If that law changes, which I hope it, personally, I hope it does, but then those changes would be reflected in whatever you have to review and opine on. But where we did have the ability to weigh in on short-term rentals, such as in a 3 and 4 plex in any of the multifamily housing concepts, whether it's the floating residential district, which is the update of the PRD, or a 3 or a 4 plex, or a co-housing.
Just to be clear.
Okay.
PRD is the existing planned residential district.
Right.
It's been removed in our proposal and changed into a floating residential district, which could be in different parts of town, subject to the town board agreeing that that was something that ought to be done. And it has very high requirements for affordability.
And environment. And very strict criteria for environment.
And it can't be in the scenic overlay, and it can't be in the
Correct.
RA.
Correct.
Right now, the way the short-term rental law reads, we've seen cases in front of us where we had people who had done short-term rentals, have 2 parcels, and 2 houses. They have to rent it as 1 unit. It's 1 short-term rental per parcel and per person in the town. So, I mean, as a commercial, there's pros and cons to all of this. We've seen where this has been someone's livelihood. They've done it their whole life. And now they have to rent it as a whole as opposed to 2 separate cabins. So that just to piggyback off of what's now as opposed to what.
But the thing I do want to say, triplexes and quads. At the moment, you can have a duplex. So a triplex is a building with 3 units, and a quad is a building with 4 units. Still scaled like a private house. That's an important qualification in the law. It has to be scaled like a private house. There are rules for buffering, there are rules for parking, and at least 1 unit has to be affordable.
At least 1 unit, could be all of them, but none can be short-term.
And that is not a size we have right now. We have duplexes, and anything bigger
goes to an FRD.
Goes to an FRD.
Or actually we go to a PRD right now.
Yeah,
a triplex and a quad have to have 1 affordable.
As we have written the draft.
Not
a duplex.
Not now.
Yeah, I understand.
No, a duplex doesn't, and an ADU doesn't.
Right. Unless it's
now we're talking about ways of enhancing that.
Like a second one.
But yeah, but the 3 and 4s don't exist right now. And a 5 through 8 would only exist in a planned residential district.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
So you couldn't have 1 piece of land and have a 5 on it.
So a couple of things is that before we give it to the town board, we had John Lyons review the entire code.
Right.
And he made his comments, and all that was taken into consideration prior to our submission. I just wanted you to know that. We also, as far as the county has, is reviewing, and
so we met with them.
We met with them informally.
And
some of the members of Dennis' team, and Dennis was part of it as well.
Yep.
Reviewed what we submitted. Some of the things that came out of what we did in terms of guaranteeing affordability came out of the comments of version 1 that we submitted in May of 2022. We got a lot of comments back saying, how come this code doesn't give us any guarantee that what's going to be built will be affordable? So that's how we baked some of that insistence of 1 unit in the triplex quads being affordable. So certain guarantees that have
and the 5 through 8s.
In the 5 through 8. So there's ways in which we brought this in. Some we introduced the idea of deed restriction with ADUs and such. So we just try to find ways in density bonus. So we just try to find ways in which we could guarantee some level of affordable housing being built with any new development.
Is that for the life of the building?
It's deeded that way. It will be approved that way when it's reviewed by the planning board.
And by the town board. I mean, they could say it's only 50 years.
Right.
But at the moment, we haven't.
In the code, we have a 50-year limit.
For a rental, but for a rental. So, so there are some here.
So why is that?
50-year? Well, it's typically much shorter than that, 30 years.
Woodstock Meadows.
Rupco is 30 years on Woodstock Commons. They have some exceptions because of the amount of units they've built in the area. They can sometimes bump it up to 50. But there's usually a cutoff period. We have Woodstock Meadows over here. Their 30-year window just closed, and now it's in the hands of an owner that's going to make those units market rate. So that we're losing affordable homes there because we don't have, pardon?
Well, that was 25 years.
I believe it was 30 years for the original.
But either way, it's
building.
expiring.
It will expire. And when it comes to housing, 30 years isn't really a long time. Frankly.
I was under the age.
Pardon?
Right, right.
And, you know, and we, you know, one of the things we tried to see if we could gain access to that property, and to
We
ensure,
being the Woodstock Housing
the
Alliance.
Woodstock Housing Alliance,
Different
tried to gain
people, some of the
access.
same people, different
A
organizations.
private nonprofit organization called Woodstock Housing Alliance has been launched in this town, and that mission, the mission of that organization, is to build some of these affordable homes in our town.
And Kirk and I are on the, well, I'm on the board and Kirk is the executive director.
Right.
I'm just a Woodstock.
And the idea was to secure funding to buy it and make it denser with additional affordable housing.
The current owners are not interested in. They're not interested in talking about. Are you talking about Woodstock Meadows? Yeah, they're not interested.
So from the Housing Committee's perspective, before the Housing Alliance was formed, I'm on the Housing Committee. So we were looking at Woodstock Meadows and how we spoke to Rupco. We said who else could purchase this property so that it would remain affordable.
Yeah, I have friends who live over there.
I do too. I do too.
They turned down Rupco too.
They turned down, right. So the owners would not talk to any entity that would keep them affordable. Well, Sam,
the children
so
of
the children, you know, Stuart Hammerman passed. His widow is not so involved. Her children maybe a little bit, but they
the children inherited it from
handed it over to a management company.
Pardon?
He's not well.
And so then they live out of state. They live in Florida, the children, and they basically found a partner to purchase it, and that partner is in Red Hook, and they're a development company, property management company, and they're currently managing the property.
So we're getting a little off topic, but I kind of want to bring us back to this to
Can
say.
I clarify something though?
Oh, okay.
The Housing Committee is a committee of the town.
That's
one thing. The Housing Oversight Task Force, which includes people from us,
and from the
somebody from
committee.
CBA and somebody from the Housing Committee, so that it represents a whole range of the parts of the town that are working on housing. That's the group that wrote this provision.
Right. So
and the Woodstock Housing Alliance is entirely different, except that there's a little overlap of
personnel. So the one other thing I would just add to that, Judith, is that the Housing Committee came up with several recommendations. The Housing Committee has been in existence since 2019, since right after the comprehensive plan, where it was established through the comprehensive plan recommendations, came up with a recommendation for updating the zoning to have it be consistent. And we wrote a grant to hire Nan Stolzenberg, and also came up with a recommendation to look at the formation of a community housing trust or community trust, which is what the Woodstock Housing Alliance is. We, the Housing Committee, were not directly involved in those things, but they were among the very specific formal recommendations we made to the town board. And every year we have gone to the town board with a report and recommendations. And now, just one more thing, last fall, through the Housing Committee's efforts, the town joined the Housing Smart Communities program, which is a county program, which supports all these things that we are trying to accomplish. That said, if there are things that you see in this draft law that will make it stronger and that the town board should consider, that's the kind of thing we're interested in hearing and seeing in your comments. Also, if, well, as in Melissa, you know, if there's inconsistencies.
Yeah, she found a few things.
She found a
that
few
aren't
things.
the way we do things.
Right. So you're the ones, you're the practitioners. You're the ones doing this, you know, week in, week out. So it's really important that your input be fed into this process. And then, as we did before, everything will be very in a detailed review and evaluated. We may come back to you with questions. And I heard that you're going to have multiple meetings about this. So that will also help you and us to understand.
Yeah, Nan's going to be with us on the 29th of June.
So that's great.
I'm having surgery
keep
the
the
day before.
conversation going for the next meeting, just so you guys can form and I can write and we can have a beautiful memo at the end of everything.
And Deborah, you'll be out of country at the time, but I will be there on the 29th and be able to support anything.
I'll bring back.
There's one thing I wanted to point out,
Truffles.
that, you know, like this is a for instance within the new code. There's a lot of conservation of land language and ways in which land can be conserved in a site plan. And as you came across when you did FAM acres, you wanted them to designate how was that land going to be, and how was it going to be enforced? How was the preservation of that land going to be enforced? And what was the entity that was going to be responsible for that? I think that's something as a planning board, you're going to come up against these. And so I would, you know, the options you have available is something to think about. Like there could be, it could be Woodstock Land Conservancy that can own it. There could be a homeowners association, such as FAM chose to do. There may be one of the owners of the property takes full ownership of that land. I mean, those, I don't know what the options are, but I think that's one example of you as a body having knowledge of the various tools in place to ensure and to then educate the property owners of what their options are.
And then make sure that you have that designated by the applicant before you approve it. So it's part of your approval.
Right, which is what you did with FAM acres.
So subdivision changes are workable. The question I have is on this affordability thing, which is that, you know, the state says Woodstock is short housing quite a bit. Quite a bit. The last number was 300-400.
Right.
We have 300-400 out in short-term rentals.
Yeah.
If those houses are not available for long-term rental, and long-term rental houses have to be built, I for one am building an ADU. You can't build affordably right now. It's just not. It's just.
Yeah, I just
cost
looked
of
into
construction,
it
the cost of anything.
Right, the market has created a situation.
$100,000 to add a bit.
So if we could try to get some of these short-term rentals back into long-term, and one of it would be by not having a run of the land, but only with the owner. That would shorten some of them.
Yeah.
And the other, as the applicant there just said, and I happen to know for a fact, there are many more houses being rented out that are on that list.
Right.
Many more.
Yeah.
In my own neighborhood, I
No, same.
So those are houses that are not available for long-term rental.
Right, right. And you know, that was one of the things that the housing committee tried to understand is how could we best leverage our existing inventory in order to achieve what you're talking about. And you know, the short-term rental market, that industry of the share industry is out of the box. The horse is out of the corral. And there's no way we're going to be able to now change and bring things and make it the way it was.
I mean, as you know, what we do with Rupco was that in order for them to even provide this housing, they had backing, financing backing from government.
Right, of course.
Cheap
money. They had subsidies,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to come across.
It is a very hard thing. And so one thing that the Woodstock Housing Alliance, just to get off topic a little bit about affordability, is that that's one of the challenges we face, is that how can we drive the cost of construction down to the point where, one, it can be mortgaged within a window of time that a financial institution would honor that, and two,
but two, that it can just simply, you can realistically build something that then can be rented and made available for affordable.
But can it be done profitably?
Well, profitably, see, that's where you have the different values. So maybe the profitability is stretched out over a longer period of time than a for-profit landlord or owner would want. So with a nonprofit, you have a different set of values that you're looking at. So you can push that return on investment out further, and that shouldn't trouble a nonprofit in that regard, as long as there is that roadmap of achieving
and you're
that.
not paying stockholders.
Yeah,
you're paying a small staff, and a lot of things can be managed that aren't even managed in the organization. They're managed by organizations that do that.
Yeah, so one of the things, Peter, I just wanted to address is that we're looking at ways to reduce the cost of construction, prefab, panelizing, different ways of approaching the challenge, right? On-site, erected in a day and a half, 2 days, and then the rest of it is done by local builders. This has been advised by Harmony Builders and Dan, and some of the things that they're doing, and also Barry Price and some of the work that he's done. So we're investigating that very seriously, and working with an architect on finding ways in which we can achieve a lower cost of building. And so I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
It's hard, it's a challenge. It will continue to be a challenge until things change, but it is something that we as an organization believe that we're willing to take it on the chin, if you will, and get something built and allow that property to begin to yield some income, and then change the paradigm. Because a community land trust changes the paradigm. It removes the land like you do with the Land Conservancy. It takes the land off the market, and the only thing that's on the market is the house or is the building, right? So that changes the formula. So the market doesn't know how to deal with that, right? So it will remain affordable as a result of that, because the only thing that's in the market is the building itself, not the land.
The other thing that's worth mentioning is, I am one example, but I'm sure I'm not going to be the only one. My house is willed to the Woodstock Woodstock Housing Alliance, and it is conceivable for it to be 3. At the moment, it's 1. I'm thinking seriously about adding an ADU. Then it would be 2. I don't have kids. My brother doesn't have kids. I am not the only person in the world who would consider doing that. Now, it's going to take talking to lawyers, making it visible to people who have a charitable bone in their body, but it's possible.
What I found, Judy, is that I used to do panelized housing and so on, but just now trying to do an ADU. When you're talking septic, you're talking well.
Right.
The cost of these things are just, you cannot believe. A well is $20,000. A septic's $40,000.
Yep.
Driveways, $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
Everything ends up.
You get a number. So when you go finance that $200,000 for your little cottage, and you pay back the bank $1,500 a month, you got to charge $2,000 a month. Well, that's not affordable. It's always got to make
for a separate building. That is absolutely true. But I met with my contractor like yesterday about adding a room, so I'd sacrifice one of the 4 bedrooms in my house. It might go as high as $100,000. I don't need a new septic. It depends on the site. Right. It depends on the house.
Yeah,
but Peter, I hear you loud and clear. This is the reality that we're faced with. And every town faces this same challenge, right? So we just have to find a way to do this. That's all I can say. There is a way, and we have to find out what that way is. I'm in touch with some of the panelized for passive homes. So that's another thing, is make it efficient, lower the cost of ownership after it's built, right? Pay for that up front. Yeah, it's really crazy to try to think like that when it comes to affordable housing. But in my opinion, my view of this town from 1962, when we had the last comprehensive plan, right, the master plan in 1962, one of the primary things it said that this town needed was some open space in the hamlet. Out of that came Andy Lee Field. Out of that came the Village Green. And out of that came a few other things associated with that. We've now identified that housing is a primary element, a primary challenge to our town. The comprehensive plan pointed that out, okay? If we can identify a way of establishing a commons of housing that's affordable in our town, long view, build that commons, add one building here, one building there, one building here. And the amount of time it would take to build a commons of affordable housing in this town would not, it could probably be done in about 2 decades. Then you would have your stock of affordable housing that would be in perpetuity available in a commons. The land would not be a part of the market. That's the vision that I hold as with Woodstock Housing Alliance. It's a long view. It requires partnerships. It requires strategic planning and thinking. But that's where we're coming. That's how we're approaching the problem. Way off target. Way off topic. Sorry.
I want to, no, it's okay. This is fine. And the passion's really good, but this kind of speaks to where we are, which is we have the tool that you have, and it's so vital to all of this working, is the zoning code and the subdivision code, so that you can say definitively certain things have to be done a certain way. So you can look at the carrying capacity of land rather than just, say it's everywhere. You can require in certain instances that a number of units be affordable, designated, and they can't be an afterthought built at the end. They have to be at the same time as the other units.
The code states that.
The code states that. So we tried in this draft to really come up with solutions, if knowing that there are people in this town, we had a meeting the other night at the community center that the housing committee sponsored. There were about 50, 60 people, at one point about 60 people there. There wasn't anybody there who said they were against affordable housing, which was really interesting because, and what we had was a conversation to look at, well, what are the barriers? What is it that's keeping us from getting to having those 300 or 400 additional units that we have? This is one step toward doing that. And the other things that the housing committee is doing, the housing smart communities, the housing alliance, all of that is part of this puzzle. And it's not going to happen overnight. But if we don't change the code, if we stick with the code we don't have the tools. You don't have the tools. So we are really promoting that we move forward with tweaks. If we can make it stronger, let's do that. But we really want to provide this town with the tools to create more opportunities for affordable units. And to your point, Peter, about the short-term rentals, we didn't take that on. That was a separate thing. It absolutely needs attention. And there are now legal cases that are making it harder for towns, unfortunately. But I think that this is a good step forward. I just wanted to say one other thing, which is if you're looking at these documents, Nan is great in that she really gave us a roadmap, gave everybody a roadmap. So this highlighted table of contents shows you where the key changes are in the subdivision and in the zoning. And like with the document itself, you control click on that section and it'll take you to that section in the code. And it's so it's all, hopefully you don't have to memorize it all, but there's enough in there that you'll say, oh, I know we've done this kind of thing before, and now here it is a different way, right? The net acreage, or the conservation subdivision, the building envelopes, all those things, and you can search on those words.
I want to highlight what you just said.
Okay.
One of the things we have wanted to be able to do is specify the building envelope.
This
would make that mandatory.
Well, the subdivision changes are very interesting And as we went through it with the FAM subdivision, we have to see in the future how this works, because up till now, a lot has lot lines.
Yeah.
And those are your boundaries. And you know, people go over them and fences and they get surveyed. But we never really had to deal with the wetland and the buffer boundaries as a line, as a real line,
right?
Because it's always just been the property line. So now we're permitting subdivisions, and the idea is to group them smaller acreages and units and keep everything else open. But those open areas, we don't have any way that we've used to control it, maintain it, supervise it in any
Until
way.
FAM came along.
That was the point that Kirk made, I think it was Kirk made it earlier, that there are various ways that could be managed. And the town is going to have enforcement, and we know that. But it could be that they are in fact owned by different people in the subdivision, but they're not building all over it.
And it's not going to be
clustering the houses, and everybody can hike on them who's part of the subdivision. But the person who decides they want to own that piece, they own it. Or in other situations, it's the homeowners association that owns it, or the Land Conservancy owns it. And we will have to develop a list of options.
But an appointed responsible person that will, all that, the HOAs have to be filed with AG. I mean, there's like a serious legal, and the HOA, you're not just paying your lawyer. There's a certain lawyer for the HOA. It's not your regular lawyer. And then it does have to be filed with the AG. A lot of times, FAM Acres was laughed at by the lawyer that they have because it's only a 10-lot subdivision. I just want you to know for an HOA, but we're Woodstock. This is what we do. This is what we were advised. You're not having 50 lots. Like, it's just.
They could have put 40 houses on that property.
But that's another point.
So based on the have a conservation subdivision, and the idea is that therefore you may have lots that are 2 acres, even though it's in a 5-acre zone, where you might have a 2-acre lot. So that's a definite lot. That's got boundaries. That's 2 acres. But now we've also added the concept of having a building envelope on a lot that might be a 10-acre lot, but 5 acres of it's wetlands. So we don't want you to go there. So we're going to give you an envelope.
You're only allotted right here.
And you have to build there. And if you sell the land, if
that envelope is not as specific as property lines, I don't know how you're going to.
It's mapped.
It's mapped. It's mapped.
But then, this is part of what the tool that you have.
I know it's mapped, but when you step over that line in the field, nobody's going to tap you on the shoulder. Whereas if it's a property line and you go over somebody else's property to hit,
I would suppose that the C of O would require it to follow the rules.
They do, and I will just say that this is not like suddenly dropped in from a satellite. So there are places that are using this technique, not a lot. I mean, we won't be the very first town to do this. So we have models that we can look to find out how other towns are addressing their enforcement thing. There's no question that that's a big need in this town.
Enforcement.
And everybody has said that. And that's going to require people really, the short-term rental folks are very good going back and back and back to the town board. I think we need to go back and say, enforcement is a real need. Here are the needs for enforcement. What is the capacity that you have to address it?
So technically, I would propose that you might want to add, and I know this is a tough one for developers, all subdivisions in the future should be done in state plane coordinates.
In what?
State plane.
Okay.
That means that any surveyor, anybody can go out there and find that line.
Got it.
Right.
Because the way it's surveyed now is you'd either have to get the original surveyor who had the original notes.
And the maps are all crazy, which is why stuff I have on my maps is
I'll email you later. I wrote it down.
State plane coordinates.
State plane coordinates for subdivision maps.
Please.
That means anybody can go out there with a GPS and say, this is the point.
And that is, and obviously now because we have GPS, because we have more technology, we can do that. Right. And that's part of what we want to be able
mean,
to.
That's the kind of thing maybe we should put in.
Yeah, exactly.
But that,
And they-
that was, see, this is exactly
they-
what
We can put it into
would
the-
like to
into
see
the
happen here.
That's why we're
is
here.
For you guys to provide the nuances
Yeah,
and the details
Absolutely.
that would strengthen this code.
Yeah. So that it can.
So the other elements that you have as tools is you have a series of documents that are not the code itself that start at a high level and work their way down into more detailed level. So you have the summary of revisions that Nan wrote. You have a highlight of benefits that Nan wrote. And then you have a more detailed benefits.
We
And
have
benefits
2-page
are-
highlights, of which 1 page is really the meat and the rest
Right.
is history.
Right. And so you have basically all these different documents that you can refer to first. And
And
get
these
a
are
sense
other
of
favorite
what changes and get a sense of in the use table.
Use table.
You know, and things. So these are the things that you will want to know about, the use table and how it's changed. What's added to it? What are the provisions we're adding to the use table?
Yeah.
What flags do you see in that use table that doesn't work based on things and your own experience? So that's the kind of feedback I think that would be very helpful to us and to make sure that the code, when it's submitted to the town for consideration of adoption, that it's as tight and as complete as possible.
That you can use it. I mean, maybe you need to do a couple of scenarios, at least to kind of look at what if you had this kind of proposal on this amount of land.
Well, just for an example, I've been trying to figure out how you figure out how big an ADU you can have. And the language is just a pretzel.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back, because I haven't done it yet, and look at the new language and see, but I'm fairly certain it's a lot clearer what I can do.
Oh, it
That's
is.
one of the
And
things
how
we
many
fixed.
square feet? And
It's one of the things we
and how-
fixed is that
I
the
mean, 10% of the gross footage of what?
yeah,
It's
right.
just
Yeah.
not comprehensible
We
as
changed
it's currently written.
So we have a process. You're going to meet on the 29th and have a workshop on the 29th of June.
But we have 2 more
subsequent-
meetings before that. We have one more meeting before
And
that.
so whatever amount of time you want to focus on this code, this package, so that you can gain a level of clarity as to what it needs, what it doesn't need.
And if you have
So
more,
my plan
Yeah.
is the next meeting, we're gonna have the same thing. We're gonna be HOTF. And that's gonna be time for you guys to tell me, I'm gonna send you all the documents again. Judy will probably send you the documents again, so they're in your email. And then come to me. I've already started, I have a list from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, and
And
we're
we're gonna
getting-
hash it out, and then that night, when I leave the meeting on the 29th, I'm gonna send the memo. So, next meeting, we will talk about this
And
as
what's
a
that
board.
date?
That's June 15th, and that's
Okay.
just us as a board, us having a conversation.
Okay.
You're telling me your concerns. The
Great.
29th, we have a workshop. They will be here. Actually scheduled a logger from DC to come in, and he's gonna do the first half. So
Great.
Nan and Kirk, I said 6:30 might be a little over, but I'll pay for your dinner if I need to buy some time or whatever I need to do. But this
Nan is gonna be
opportunity,
at that one, right?
Nan will be at
Yeah,
that one. But this opportunity for a logger, as we saw with Easton
Oh, wow.
Lane
Oh,
and
yeah.
that big mess
Um,
that came out over the land has been in timber harvest. I thought this was so important right now for us to have him come in and for me to have a connection, because I tried so hard during that case and it took me 2 months to get a call back. So I wanted to bring him in as soon as possible. So I have him coming in too, which means that you all will get continuing ed credit that night. And I haven't emailed.
No, I
So
don't
how do
get
you
back
propose
till
we go through the
July
code with
15th.
just the board? Are we gonna go through item by item?
Oh,
But I think Judy could address, well, how do you want,
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's a matter of how much time we have. But if everyone has looked at it and identified the things they have questions about, rather than going through the entire thing, that might be a little more efficient.
You know, we
or
have.
even if like next meeting,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
everybody can come with maybe a pro and con at minimum. Like every single one of you come with a pro and a con or concern, or, you know, like, I like this, I don't like this.
That would be great.
And I can like compose the list of that.
Absolutely.
Then maybe base it off this.
Kirk and I have seen these documents.
Yeah. Maybe you could base it off this list of the summary of revised changes.
That's a very good.
Yes.
This is a 7-page document that captures basically all of the
Everything.
revisions that we said. So use this as a reference.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a
And
good. That's a
One
great.
that Dan wrote, okay?
We
And
will
this
send it
puts all
again.
the revisions in there. You could just go down this and review it and then go to the code and read it, and therefore you might be able to gain an opinion as to what you think it should be or shouldn't be, right? And that would be my recommendation.
I use this all the time. This is how I make my notes for presentations. I go through this list, the same document, and then I then can cross-reference in the code.
So my goal on the 29th is to have Nan here for a Q&A, because we're going to be and we're going to have it down, and I'm going to have the list. And then when we leave that night, I'm writing everything that we decided, and it's going to the town board at 10 o'clock.
And when does this time clock start, this 45 days?
I never heard the 45-day time clock.
45 days started on May 9th.
But I never heard that.
April 18th.
April 18th, that was primarily for the county.
And
that didn't, it was.
So that's a county referral
response.
Yeah.
They could have asked for 60, they didn't, doesn't matter. It is
you can extend
public comment.
And I did clear it with Bill. Good. I asked him to ask the town board. I had 2 emails to him, and both first he said he didn't think it'd be a problem. I asked the town board, and then he wrote me sure. So he knows where we're at, and I promised that evening I'm not leaving here until I send him the response.
Yeah, it'll be, and at some point the town board is going to schedule a public hearing.
And I think it's important that our recommendations get there before the public hearing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then there'll be
it jived with that for us.
And all this while, anyone who wants to submit comments, it's the zoning updates at woodstockny.org.
Or my line.
Or yours. Well, right. Thank you, Melissa. So we're cross-referencing. We got it down, right?
That's another thing that we'll be doing as a task force is we'll be organizing those comments so you can see some of the comments that's coming from the community and the concern that's being expressed from theirs. Okay.
And one of the documents that's online in the supplementary documents, not in the ones that are urgent that you read, is a list of all the comments we got on version 1 and how we categorized them and what we did with them.
That's where?
And then it goes to the state.
The town website has 2 things that say zoning updates.
So the
one of them says supplementary, and that has things like that and Nan's resume that are not. You have to read them to understand things. So if you want to know what comments we got, okay, so it's in that second category of supplementary documents.
So this is the process. We have this comment period now. It's open comment. The town board holds a public hearing. They determine how, maybe it's 2 weeks after the public hearing is closed, that they will accept additional comments. All of those comments come back to the task force. The town board has asked us to review them all. We have questions. We may come back to some of the commenters. We will organize them, as Kirk said, the way we did the first round. Then we will, look at what could be changed or, how that might, and go back to the town board with any recommendations for any additional revisions. The town board will look at that. They will be simultaneously doing secret, and then they will vote to hopefully adopt. And at that point, it goes to the state.
Yeah. To the state.
Correct. But there's no state review. So there's no.
Right. If the town board approves it,
the town board approves
it will get the number or whatever it is.
Yeah. And we've already got the county.
The state doesn't have to make sure that it's in compliance with state codes or anything.
No.
That's why John Lyons.
The only issue is with the state is with the environment.
Right.
Yeah.
So John Lyons has already reviewed.
Yes, he's been working with Nan and
he provided a lot of content and a lot of it. Most of it was wordsmithing. You can say it differently, but
John Lyons style.
But he did provide provide some really valuable comments.
Yeah, he did.
Yes,
he did. And all of that went in before
we gave it to the board.
We gave it to the town board.
I like to raise one thing that has come up, and you may wonder about it, and so I want to raise it. The second ADU idea, One of the suggestions that various people have had is that we require the first ADU to be affordable. And we felt that that was not a good idea because that is already a right. So to take rights away from people did not seem like a smart move. If you want to have a second ADU, it has to be affordable and it has to come before planning board. But a first ADU is what it is now. It's subject to the limits on short-term rentals as they are now.
It requires a special use permit.
And there's going to be a figure for what's affordable, an actual number.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
The
a
way
percentage
affordability-
of,
Based on
Amen.
income.
yeah.
30% of your income.
Is what the rent would be.
And it's 60% up to, let's see,
80%.
up to 80% AMI.
That's
That's the
average
federal number.
mean income of the county.
And it's
Yeah.
countywide, it's household based, and it's up to 120
If you want to buy a house
for
For
purchase.
for a mortgage.
Right. So it captures the lower side up to 80 and then up to 120. Those numbers, I was amazed as there, and we saw this the other night. Oh, by the way, the
Yeah, I
housing
think I've got that
committee,
slide.
the
Terrifying.
the PowerPoint that we did the other night with the housing committee is now up on the housing committee's page on the town website. I urge you to look at it because it goes through different levels of income, wages per hour that people in Woodstock make
I've got
for
it here.
different professions, and what 30% of their income would be if they were paying for rent.
And then if you turn the page over, you'll see what the very few available rentals are going for at the moment.
Off the charts, literally off the charts.
I mean, there's not.
Deborah, you know, it has never been on the charts.
I know. I know.
And who would,
We've been talking about affordable housing.
who would monitor that it is kept at?
Well, it depends on who the owner is.
Right.
If it's
The owner
like
would
Housing
be-
Alliance, we would monitor that. If it's a private owner, there would have to be an agency in our town, the housing committee possibly, that would take, that would be responsible to do
Well,
that.
they would have to get the
But that's a
document.
policy matter. The town board is going
The
to.
town board is gonna have to establish that
But
policy.
it could be
in
some
town.
sort of an HOA or something, right?
Correct.
Just naming somebody responsible.
Whomever does it has to be accepting the eligibility documentation has to be
That's huge.
attested to be accurate, and it has to be done on an annual basis.
Yes, this is what other communities do.
But you could also assign that.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
So we
Absolutely.
could say that Rumco
Yes,
could be our agent.
absolutely.
Yeah,
That's the
Absolutely.
town
already
board.
have that
Exactly.
process.
That's right. And they
Yes.
could do it even if
Exactly.
it's not their housing.
Right.
Yes.
They've
No, I
already said
understand
that.
that.
No, I know
The-
you
the
know,
choice.
but I
So
just for everybody.
That's the answer.
Right.
There are
There just has to be
agencies in
someone
place.
responsible and deeded so that it stays that unit. If it's the one unit, it will
Right.
stay affordable. through
See,
time.
our job was to write the code. The town board has to decide what aspects of this are policy and what they're going to do about it. And we are going to make recommendations to them for policy changes.
Yeah.
To support
But you're going
this.
to be requiring that there be that documentation has to be provided. And the initial place would be with the property owner, if it's a rental.
And their lawyer with some written, right now for driveways and roads, we do road maintenance agreements. This would
Right.
be a
Similar.
letter of intent for an HOA or something with a signed notarized name.
I don't
I
have.
got what I
I
need.
just kept text
Yeah,
on them.
But they have to have a plan and
Yeah,
it has to be
exactly.
in the process.
Right.
And someone has to be accountable just besides the person who bought the land and had an idea.
This was the presentation that was made
Tuesday.
by the housing
I
committee.
learned a lot.
Is
about
it
these.
on
Housing
the
Committee's
web?
website.
Yeah, yeah, it went on
The
today,
Woodstock housing.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
on the web now,
on the
Woodstock
housing
housing
page.
website.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
which is a committee of the town, so it's. part
over
of
the next
town
period of
board.
time, I'm in town, I'm available to attend whatever. Deborah and I will be in close communication while you're gone. We'll do our best to support in anything you need, in any way you need to help you.
And we have other members of the task force too, that are aware of this piece of time where this discussion is going on. They're knowledgeable as Judith is, Jeff Collins, Laura Rickey, who's also on the town board. She's like a very detailed person. Richard Hefner, he's on our task force. He's very knowledgeable and he's been very involved, particularly in the non-zoning policy questions. So we have a really good team.
And it's
And
amazing. I mean, we kind of thought it was over, but it's not over, but it's gonna be.
that's why I made my plane, my holiday reservations.
I hope this was helpful. I don't know if it was. Okay.
We didn't, so I hope you're not totally
There are more
overwhelmed.
pages that are very interesting. You might want.
John, I can send you the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go on, I have to send it to colleagues and.
Could you send it there?
I can.
Send it to everybody.
So the PowerPoint
The
and
pictures are nice.
And the charts are good because they summarize things.
Right.
And that's a good place to start.
There's actually going to be a recording of the event as well.
Right. It's going on.
In the
Yep.
works.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah, have a wonderful trip.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it. My daughter lives across the ocean, and that was sort of the impetus behind my whole thing.
You're going to Britain?
Italy.
Lucky you.
I'm jealous.
I'll be in
I know. I know that your family.
No, I want to say one thing. I probably won't be here on the 29th because I'm having heart surgery today, but I will be on Zoom.
On Zoom,
Work
good.
here
Yeah, on
and
Zoom.
Thank
well,
you
I've got.
for
We want.
inviting us. Well,
I'll be in a sling.
Judy, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right, everybody. A motion to approve a draft resolution for Craigo.
It's just like a regular.
So moved. Do I need to say it in more detail than that?
No,
I knew they were talking about.
Craigo SUP 230482A.
Do I hear A's from everyone?
Hey.
Lovely. So, as I was saying, the 29th, I have that blogger thing coming in the advance. So we're gonna send documentation, take some notes, come back to me. And then it can just be our conversation.
And I will be here for that.
Yeah.
Are we also reviewing other cases or are we just focusing on
We'll
our
have a few little
concerns?
cases, these STRs are
More?
Yeah.
So we're 15 total. I have a transfer right now.
But since the town board
and then
approved
one,
them, it's
there's
like.
so I agree with this. Yeah.
I guess I might as well ask this question.
Please.
We have an SDR law and it has a cap, but somehow the town board can change the cap back and forth. How do you do that without changing the law?
I'm just your administrator.
Okay, I'm just
No,
curious.
the law provided, the law said the town board can set a cap, but the law didn't say what the cap was.
At one point,
Which is the right way to write it.
the town board and supervisor changed, and they were using a higher number. And then they were told, now I'm upstairs, and then they were told the number's this, they were already over that. I mean, that was at one point, no one was told that it got changed.
Well, that's the same process by which the CEA was never filed with DEC.
Which is why I tell you guys, even the local laws,
Really?
I'm the one who goes on the agendas and searches them out. I would have no idea. And with this, now all of a sudden I have the document, I never had the document.
And why our small group ended up having to lobby to get permits is because we all had Ulster County permits, and the law said that anyone with an Ulster County permit had to be notified by the town that they needed SDR permits, and we never were. So we got notified that we needed a permit, and by the way, there are no permits.
Yeah, that's what that's.
And so it took us 2.5 years.
There are no permits. Well, there's proof of enforcement. I mean, yes, minimally, I mean, we have, technically, we've had one CEO dealing with /1.5, you know, with SDRs, but you know, I hear this enforcement. They are so busy up there, like I can't even get to have a conversation with what you got to sign. I can't, like, they are so busy, you know, and I see the violations. They are sending violations.
So they're pretty good about tracking down people who are listing on webs, you know, like on Airbnb, who don't have a permit. There hasn't been any enforcement of the regulation that no more than one person can own, that a person cannot own more than one. or
Oh,
that
we ixed that with a bunch.
you've done it? And also that, as far as I can tell, there will be a requirement that all members of a corporation have to be individual.
If it comes to the planning board, just so you guys
Yeah.
are aware, and it's an LLC, because I know you would, and you came in when I was having another half lunch meeting, as you know, in my office, Lisa. I have all the documentation of every member in the LLC. They don't see the board until I have all that legal documentation. So I cross-reference names. So I can tell you all of the cases that the planning board saw for short-term rentals are one owner, one in the planning board.
I have a question. If they are claimed to be owner occupied, do they have to get a special use permit?
It's all how the table's set. So what owner occupied is 3 bedrooms or more.
Okay, because there's a list of owner occupied. Some of them are LLCs.
But
and they're owner occupied. So
but that stems
and they
from they proved residence at the home in Woodstock. And the ZO,
See,
if their driver's license says 123 Main Woodstock, how can you contest that?
Look, I have an LLC for my business. People get LLCs
DBAs.
for a small amount
right,
of liability.
I understand.
So it doesn't necessarily prove that it isn't somebody who's actually.
I didn't realize that you were tracking down the individual members of LLCs, because when I went on.
My wonderful map woman can give you a map of all the SDRs in Woodstock.
And which ones are listed as owner occupied and which are not are color coded.
Right,
Okay.
right.
One of the reasons I did that map is that when the thing first happened, I looked at what they were doing and I said, but it has nothing to do with density. And they're all clustered around the center of town.
Near a street that's
to know where
road.
things
So
are.
like Mayor Street.
We need to know where, I know. Well, it's not quite as much. I could show it to you. It's not quite, because some of it belongs to.
But we're more aware than what you
which is
think
technically
is
not
just
an
my
SDR.
point. And you had mentioned LLC, and I didn't want to get into it too.
No.
Because, you know.
Well, we know that, but
Yeah, but I made that map and I recently updated it because when Butch sends me an Excel spreadsheet, and if he hasn't coded it in the way that I've got it set up, then I can code it very easily. When I pull it into the map, it lights up those properties. And I can see exactly where they are. Now, I haven't done it since, I don't know, February.
Does the STR task force?
I
know
haven't
about this now?
updated either.
Well, they should. I sent
They
it.
should.
they don't,
should.
they don't, because they were
And I first
amazed
did.
that they were amazed when I said, yeah, we have a list of the owner occupied. And they said, how did you get that list? So we sent them the list.
Yeah, you got the list from Butch.
Yeah, we asked them for it, but
I got the
STR
list from
task
Butch.
force doesn't have it. Or they didn't ask for it.
If
So
they
they're
would like a
basing
copy
all
of
the-
the map, and the last time I updated it, I said to Butch,
It's
has
been a
anything
while.
changed? And he said, no, nothing's changed. Well, now you guys are on it, so I'm gonna have to get
We have,
updated.
yeah, we'll have to update again.
But
you know what?
that's small.
Downtime too.
I would love to sit down with you because you seem to really know a lot and really talk about how can we make this STR law, what needs to be in it?
Well,
so
I
it
think
really,
location and density of STRs is something that ought to be in the
okay,
law.
so that's one.
Because the vast majority are within a mile of the green, which you would expect.
But what
still.
about,
And I don't think the STR task force recommendations do address density at all.
Well, they should.
They
I
should.
think they're starting
And
to.
I thought Bill said that they were going to.
But what about, how did you identify if someone is really an investor who's just bought it to profit
I don't
from it,
know.
or if somebody is a community member who is trying to offset some of their expenses?
But is that
like,
another discrimination that we really can't have?
Well, we currently have a discrimination.
And then
between
as a
owner and
planning
non-owner
board, we
occupied.
can't
already have
make that
discrimination.
discrepancy at all.
Well, one thing that I don't think is being enforced, which
Unenforceable
would take care of- the law says that I can't be rented for more than 180 days a year. That would certainly discourage people who are in it as pure rental, as pure investment, because their return on investment won't be enough.
How many
Right.
staff to track that?
Right, how many,
Well,
tracked and how many days?
Part of our proposal is
You should
that.
present a log. You should present
I am
a
going
log.
to show you the map.
You should present a log of every time you have, how many days did you rent and what did you earn? We should
But
present that.
But the question is still, how many staff to track all of this information? And what is it buying the town?
Wouldn't your hospitality tax indicate that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I don't think it does.
I mean,
Well, you know,
And why is that
there's
hospitality tax
proposals
only
in Albany
3%?
that would let towns tax.
And why is the hospitality tax only
short-term
3%?
rentals.
The hospitality tax, are they giving us back any information that we could really use?
I don't think so.
All right. Now I've just zoomed out a bit. So you can see.
This is amazing that the.
Blue is what?
The owner occupied are the darker blue, the possibly owner occupied, we're not sure about. Those are the lighter blue. The non-owner occupied are the green, the hotels and B&Bs, because I wanted to take them in. And then there were categories not clear. So this is the southeastern part of town. And if I go into the center of town.
What's yellow?
So this is amazing that the task force doesn't know about this.
What's yellow?
Yellow is the Hamlet Commercial District.
Yeah.
Oh, the possibly non-owner occupied. And then the possibly owner occupied. Yeah. I mean, there's some ambiguity in the data I was given. But if we look at the whole town, some of them are fairly large properties that only have a house on them.
It's
So
significant.
The map Judy and I worked on.
Let's have an adjournment. You guys can keep talking.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for
Second.
and you know, the
I
further
second.
out we get, the fewer there are.
What's the concern about density? I'm curious that we shouldn't have so many in
Not yet.
town
If
because
you have a street
Not yet.
where there are 5